am or where I am, I've lost my mind. It's slick as glass, Jack. There's not a thing that'll stick to it. As I began to soothe her conversation back to stories of her sister Stell, and Stell's Harvey, the boyfriend she met at bingo, the stories of deaf school and the Eastern Star. My father's gentle wit coaxed her punchlines, while the nurses and the nieces laughed around us. I was happy standing with my father among the wounded in the days after he died. And I would like to read a second poem by Lee Young. It's called Mnemonic. A mnemonic is a strategy to help you to remember things. Even a good father-son relationship is not always an easy one. And I think he touches a little bit on that too. Mnemonic. I was tired, so I lay down. My lids grew heavy, so I slept. Slender memory, stay with me. I was cold once, so my father took off his blue sweater. He wrapped me in it, and I never gave it back. It is the sweater he wore to America, this one, which I've grown into, whose sleeves are too long, whose elbows have thinned, who outlives its rightful owner. Flamboyant blue in daylight, poor blue by daylight, it is black in the folds. A serious man who devised complex systems of numbers and rhymes to aid him in remembering. A man who forgot nothing. My father would be ashamed of me, not because I'm forgetful, but because there is no order to my memory, a heap of details, uncatalogued, illogical. For instance, God was lonely, so he made me. My father loved me, so he spanked me. It hurt him to do so. He did it daily. The earth is flat. Those who fall off don't return. The earth is round. All things reveal themselves to men only gradually. I won't last. Memory is sweet. Even when it's painful, memory is sweet. Once I was cold, so my father took off his blue sweater. Isn't he wonderful? I'd like to have known his father too, I think. And so I'll read a poem of mine about that sometimes difficult relationship. And it's called Hard Talk. 1. This is what my father said. I could have worked harder in my medical career, might have had more money, big honors, but I had your mother and you kids. That's all I ever really wanted. He said this often. Doctors are never home much. This is what my mother said. Sometimes I had to make your father stay home. He never seemed to know what to do with you kids. I said, get a hobby, take them to the park. I don't think he ever learned to play. 2. My father and I related like a faulty phone line. First the connection crisp and clear, then filled with static, sometimes dead. I came home wrecked from a teenage adventure, sobbing clueless tears on the porch steps while he sat beside me, struggling to reassure. I've forgotten the words that failed to ease my hurt. I remember that he stayed beside me, not driven off by his own loss for answers. I called home from later flights of wonder. We left dry desert this morning. We're buried in 3 feet of snow tonight. Did you know mountains could do this? Only to have my wings clipped by his practicality. How'd the car run? Did the credit card help? Then my storm clouds would drive us both to ground, conversation buried in drifts of cold silence. 3. Mother always worried his overweight would kill him, but harsh words never changed his ways. You should have seen him after the war, she often said. He was as slender as Cary Grant. Emaciated was his reply, a prisoner of war of the American Army. Better to carry something extra for a rainy day. Years later, in a summer of drought, he took to his bed, said, I'm sick and I'm scared. I can feel my heart failing. He was a doctor given to false alarms, the father of our hypochondria. You need exercise, we said. Lose weight, lighten up, you'll be fine. Afterwards, I had my guilt that we denied his grief, spurned unwelcome conversations. Mother said it was just as well we never encouraged his self-pity. It would only have made it worse. Daddy, next time I want you to tell me whatever you will, how to handle your curtain call, what it's like to be dying. One time when we were in the graduate workshops at UT, I read one of these poems that had the word daddy in it. Somebody raised their hand and said, well, a grown man wouldn't refer to his father as daddy. And most of the people in the room, being from around here somewhere, immediately said, well, you're not from the South. If you don't call your father daddy. I'll read one more shorter one of mine that is also responding to Lee Young Lee. And it came out of a workshop with Carl Phillips, responding to one of Lee's poems. And it's totally different from anything else I have ever written. And so I also, I noted that it's after a poem by Lee Young Lee. It's called Safe Haven. As though he might, if he refrained from breathing, live forever, as though he could travel through his own heart and arrive on other shores, as though by the aversion of his eyes he might stay the hand that would hold his ruin, as though within its gate his own garden might fill the nights with jasmine blooms that never fade, a fragrance not unlike love. There is a ghost inside the garden. He can hear its breath heavy in the dark, can feel its proximity, the beating of a heart utterly known, utterly unknown. And then I wanted to give at least one word about fathers to our friend Naomi Nye, who adored her father so much and has written so beautifully about him. A lot of it is in this recent book of hers, Transfer. This particular poem is also more of a bridge between her father, I think, and her own life, her role in the world, and his too. He was a writer, a journalist and a writer. And so the poem is called Storyteller. Where is the door to the story? Is the door left open? When he sat by our beds, the days rushed by like water. Driftwood, bricks, heavy cargoes disappearing downstream. No matter, no matter. Even the trees outside our screens tipped their cooling leaves to listen. We swam so easily to the stone village. Women in thick dresses, men with smoky breath. We sat around the fire, pitching in our own twigs. The world curled around us, sizzled and popped. We dropped our troubles into the lap of the storyteller, and they turned into someone else's. Also, when I was taking courses, first taking courses at UT and studying with a dear man, David Webble, and the first time David told me he thought I might have some skill and I should keep after it. And I said to him, but David, I'm only a storyteller. I don't think I can be a poet. David, being a man of few words, he thought that over for a minute and he said, well, I think you can be both. So, you all probably all know that. If you don't know that, I'll offer it to you. It was one of the most important things I ever was told. I guess I have to close with the father poem. And it's one that some of you have heard too many times, and I ask your forbearance. I see some people here I don't think maybe have heard this poem, so I'm going to read it. It's called Vigil. It's the title poem in my book. Vigil. This is what my father did for me. When I lingered for days with an illness, stricken by a blinding throb in my head, he came from the city, from the sickbed where he would die in 2 years. A doctor with a failing heart, a wounded healer. When the pills did not help, when the steam did not help, when I faced another night in pain and dread, my father took ice and a towel from the kitchen and sculpted a cap around my head. He held it in place with his great brown surgeon's hands, held his caring to my head while the hours passed, 2 o'clock, 3, 4, until he had frozen the ache away, had willed the pain gone, until he had given me rest, and then he slept on my floor until dawn. This is what one man can do for another out of an extraordinary love, can hold another's head in his hands so the strongest feelings pass between the skin and blood. A man can hold another man in his pain through the night until he is healed. Thank you all so much.